Hello, hello.
Hello. Okay, we are here with the lovely Hannah. We've talked about you a lot on the podcast. You're finally back from Australia.
Finally back.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So nice to be here.
It's great to have you. Now we get to hear the truth. We've heard Joe's side of all the stories. We've heard Joe's side of how you met.
All been very one-sided, hasn't it?
Well, very one-sided.
I think that we were talking about what to discuss with Hannah, and I think she's always topic of conversation here. But now we could hear it from the horse's mouth. Of how she really feels about everything.
He's calling you a horse. Yeah. But now we get to hear the truth. I think we're all excited about that. So you're back from Australia.
I am.
And I noticed you chose Foster's.
I just figured to myself, if I'm going to come back from Australia for, from the last 3 months, that the appropriate drink to bring would be a Foster's. Even though, in a weird way, I had this like personal vendetta against Foster's because it was the quintessential Australian drink, even though no Australians drink Foster's.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
I know. And then about a year ago, and I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let me just give it a go. And it's actually pretty good.
All right.
So
let's crack it open.
I brought it as a present. I don't know why it's in such a giant can though. Cheers.
Cheers.
So nice to be back. So nice to see you.
Eye contact, please.
Oh yes, always.
Yeah.
Eye contact. Eye contact.
Important.
It's
Not
good.
bad, right?
It's really good.
It's not
It is
bad.
pretty good for an Australian beer. Yeah.
What do you say? For
I've
an
also-
Australian beer?
Oh, I was just gonna say.
I want to know the origin story of how you guys met because we've heard it from Joe, and I want to see if they match up.
All right. So we met on Hinge, and I remember we matched. I remember going through it on, I think it was the day after Halloween. We matched, and then we talked for maybe 5 minutes, if that. Niceties back and forth. And then he was like, when can I take you out? And I thought to myself, oh, I really like this spontaneity. Like as an Australian and just like the person that I am as well, I always enjoyed getting right to the point when I was dating. And I was quite exhausted with the back and forth that usually happened with a lot of those apps and a lot of the people on them. So I was like, all right, fuck yeah, let's go. And I think there was maybe like a 3-hour point from when we matched to when we went out that night. Because he was like, when can I take you out? And I was like, tonight or Wednesday? And I was kind of trying to test the spontaneity a little bit further. And he was like, tonight. I was like, done, easy.
But didn't you say prior to that you asked your friends, your roommates, if you should go meet somebody because you just stopped talking to somebody else?
I just stopped talking to this like a lunatic of a human being. And that in itself, it kind of exhausted me from dating as well. And the forwardness intrigues me, but then I was like, oh, am I jumping back straight
Another
to the
lunatic,
same boat?
yeah.
Exactly, same boat.
I want to ask what made this person a lunatic, like just the general. We've heard a lot of horror stories in here and weird stuff, so I'm just curious to the situation.
I mean, I think he was just like a lunatic to the bone, just in terms of like one of those people who are left of center, but in a bad way. He took a whole bunch of drugs. He was like very high up in a very prominent company, but he was a bit of he was definitely a narcissist. And I don't know, I can't even put into words exactly what made him a lunatic, but you know how you just meet someone and you're like, you're a lunatic.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I spent like a couple of months like back and forth, kind of dating him, kind of not, but it was just sucking a lot of energy out of me. And I was, like I said, I was pretty much to the end of my tether with just like dating in general. And then he popped up on my phone and I was like, all right, let me just give it a go.
Yeah.
You never know, right?
But you liked me, right? Because that's what I would say, because I think that's how it happened.
What, when we first met or through?
You liked my profile on Hinge.
Well, if I remember correctly, I was going through Hinge and I saw you and I was like you. And then it was like, it's a match. So you had liked me previously.
Okay.
That makes sense. I don't know how Hinge works, but that makes sense.
I think that's how it worked. And I was like, oh, and then I messaged you and I think I said g'day, something very very simple and very Australian. And then he messaged straight back. So he was on the app and I was like, all right. And like I said, it was just something about that 5-minute conversation where it was straight to the point. Hi, how are you? Where are you from? Where do you live? Blah, blah, blah. And he was like, all right, well, I want to beat around the bush basically. Like, when can I take you out? And then we met 3 hours later and...
My first vegan restaurant.
First vegan restaurant.
That was
Shout out Gracias Madre.
Thank you, Gracias
Yeah,
Madre.
that was rule number one. Because I said, oh, I'm going to take you to so-and-so or whatever. And she was like, well, I'm a vegan. And I was like, okay.
Did you know what a vegan was at that point?
Not to the extent that I know now.
Okay.
But
I could almost like hear the eye roll through the messaging.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, a fucking vegan.
He texted me. He's like, I'm taking this bitch to a vegan restaurant. I don't even know what that means.
Fucking
but when I
vegan.
Googled vegan restaurants, there were so many. And I picked the one that was closest right down the street from the apartment.
Can I just say this?
But it was really, Gracias Madre is really nice.
You know where he used to live? You know where Gracias Madre is? I got there 5 minutes early. he was 10 minutes late. And when he told me where he lived,
And
I was
I
like,
drove.
and he drove.
Wow.
I was like, you live right around the corner. And that was my first introduction of time.
Oh, and he had the Porsche, right?
He had the rent a Porsche at that
The
point.
rent a Porsche,
rent
yeah.
a
It wasn't
Porsche
a
at that
rent a
point.
Porsche, but
Borrowed Porsche, or you were car sitting.
Whatever
essentially.
it wasn't permanent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you think about that when he rolls up in a Porsche?
well, let's give Joseph some context here. So Joseph, when we first met, we're sitting at dinner, we're having a great time, and she sees me pull up in the Porsche, right? As you know, I clearly don't drive a Porsche these days. And she's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm the CEO of a dating app." So in her head, she's like, "Holy
Douchebag.
shit!" No, she's like, "Who is this rich motherfucker who's the CEO of a dating app with a Porsche?" Now she knows we're at the bottom of the barrel startup with no Porsche, but
Well, I think we always, like when we're going on a first date, we always kind of put our best foot forward, right? I didn't see you pull up in the Porsche. I didn't see the Porsche until after we left Gracias Madre.
true.
And we walked up to it and he was like, "This is my car." And I was like, "Cool." Like, I mean, I've never had a license. I've never owned a car, right? I'm 32 years old. And so like that, first and foremost, that's like the base layer of it. But then, I mean, nothing like that has really ever impressed me. Like a nice car's a nice car, cool. But I couldn't really differentiate that from the car that you have now. It's like, they just look different.
Yeah,
Pretty much the same.
Get you from point A to point B. That's basically all you need.
Yeah, and I think when we talked to Dr. Ali about what you're actually attracted to, a lot of the things happened when Hannah and I first met, right? Like, obviously, we say that first point of contact, you do want to have some type of attraction to somebody, and we obviously did through the app. But yeah, when our waiter kept coming over, and so nice, but she's like, "Hey, you guys ready to order?" And we're like, "Shit, we forgot." And it was a woman, right?
It was a woman.
Yeah, and she would come back in 5 minutes and be like, "Okay, like you ready to order?" And we're like, "Oh, we forgot." And she's like, "Are you two like mentally okay? Like, how do you keep forgetting what you want?"
It was one. You know how like you see. I mean, it sounds so corny to say, but you know how you see in those rom-coms where it's like that first date where they're just like locked eyes.
Yeah.
And there's almost like visible sparks going between them. That's what it was like, and we just couldn't. We were too busy, kind of like devouring each other to be able to devour anything else. And we ended up getting like a couple of nibbles and a drink, and then we went to EPLP.
Yeah.
For a beverage. And as we walked out of Gracias Madre, he leaned in and gave me the first kiss. And I was like, okay, all right. Leaning against the Porsche, might I add.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
And then he dropped me home like a gentleman. And we made out for like teenagers for like 20 minutes in front of my apartment building.
Wow.
And I went up and my face was like red, not only from like sexual tension and just like excitement, but also power because of this stupid beard, which ruins my face all of the time. But my roommate, who's also my best friend at that time, she just said, "You're like buzzing. Like you've just got this energy about you." And I just felt like I'd been filled up and I had met somebody that, well, I didn't know at that point would be my forever person, was definitely somebody I was far detachment from the lunatic that I just stopped seeing.
Yes.
Put it that way.
Did you, so obviously you guys, like you said, you were kind of super into each other from the beginning. Was there any hesitancy once you were like, okay, I need to take a little beat here. I just got out of something. I don't want to rush into anything. Or did you kind of just like, were you full steam ahead?
I'm a bit of a full steam ahead type of human being in general, but I think because there wasn't like a love connection with this lunatic beforehand, you know what I mean? It was just more like, this is an interesting experience. Like he lived a very bizarre, lavish life. And I was like, what's all, this all about? But I think when I met Joe, there was something within me that was clicked and went, this might be your person. This might be something that actually has a longevity to it. But it was just about trying to explore that and see what that was. There was no hesitation though.
Sure. A couple questions actually. So I believe yesterday we were on Stephanie from Broke Girls Therapies podcast. Shout out Stephanie, what up? He said that he used to be super early and punctual to stuff. Right?
I said I was super
You said
early?
it yesterday. And that's why, yeah, because we're talking about like you remember that, right? Yeah, yesterday.
No.
Yeah, you were talking about like when you used to date in New York. You're like, I was always like early, 15 minutes early.
Oh.
And then now
to a
you're
first date, I was always
Yeah.
early. Now,
Not to mine.
not to yours,
Not
which
to
is
mine.
very interesting because he literally said this
it?
yesterday. So
maybe
maybe
I don't know why I was late to that, but now in life, everybody knows I'm
Always late.
So on the car ride over, she's like, "Hey, can you text Steve and the guys and let them know you're gonna be late?" And I was like, "No." And she's like,
common
"She's like,
courtesy.
you're gonna be
It's
15
Thank you.
minutes late. Like,
Welcome.
text them." And I said, "Please stop telling me to text them." And I'm not gonna text them. I'm late every podcast, and they know I'm gonna be late, so they don't need to text. And she's like, "You're late to every podcast." I'm like, "Yeah," and they expect to know it.
I mean, I kind of just got a view from our very first date that his time management wasn't as strict as mine.
Well, you know,
Put it
I'm
that
thinking maybe like all the other first dates that didn't work out, they were like, oh, this guy's super early. He's so needy. He just wants to be liked. And maybe he just dropped that whole facade and he's like, I'm just going to play it cool.
Maybe that's something he knew.
He had his leather jacket. He had his leg up on the Porsche, rolls up 15 minutes late.
Imagine?
He's like, I don't even want to be here. And then you were into it.
Yeah, that nonchalant attitude really whipped me in.
Let me ask you this too. So another topic that came up on Stephanie's pod yesterday was she had someone write in, and I forget the overall question, but one of the questions within it was like, how do I ask a guy to pay for my Uber on a first date to the date?
Yeah.
And I think that's ridiculous without any sort of like I gave a couple caveats, right? If you're talking for 2 weeks and there's a real connection and you're like, maybe you offer, but I feel like if a woman asks or expects a man to do it on the way there, I think that's really bizarre. How do you feel about that?
I think that's really bizarre too. I mean, granted, I don't come from America. I don't come from this culture, the dating culture here in America. In Australia, it's pretty split down the middle. You know what I mean? Like granted, I wasn't dating that long in Australia before I moved out into the world, but I myself have always been a big believer. I mean, you even asked if you could come and pick me up for our first date.
Yeah.
And I said, appreciate that. Haven't vetted you yet. Don't want like some stranger coming to pick me up.
Very reasonable.
But I cannot remember once in my entire dating history that I've asked someone to pay for an Uber, especially for the first date.
And especially on the way there when you don't even really know the person.
I mean, that's just bizarre, I think. But I think that ties into this American way of dating where it's like a lot of the fiscal and kind of like emotional responsibility is put onto the man to begin with to see if like you can provide for me, you can take care of me. When in reality, it's like if two people decide to go on a date, you're both autonomously like responsible for that date. You know what I mean? You go there, and then if you start a connection and whatever way you want to deal with that relationship in terms of those terms, then great. But I think that's absolutely ridiculous.
And then you brought up the good point of how it's like a give and take thing, right? Like if the guy pays, it's like assuming, okay, since I paid, I expect this.
Yeah, like exactly. You want to be careful of like if you do stuff like that, like I said if a woman expects a guy to pay for her Uber on the way there, like I felt it sets like a weird precedent and has like these weird expectations. And then I feel like it could work the opposite way where a guy's like, okay, I'm paying for the Uber, I'm paying for dinner and drinks. She's going to suck my dick because that's how it works. It's a transactional thing.
And that's exactly what it feels like, a transactional thing. And it's almost like a transactional thing for the woman asking for the Uber to come down. It's like this rule book.
Yeah.
This bizarre rule book, quite outdated as well, that I really feel like we have to kind of leave by the wayside. I mean, obviously whatever works for you, if you want to adhere to those more traditional
So why do I pay for all the meals?
Because you literally won't let me, but do I do the reach every single time?
You do.
I do. Thank you very much.
Don't start trouble.
Yeah, exactly.
The fuck?
I even reached on the first date and you're like, no. I'm a gentleman. I'll always pay. And I was like, okay, that's great. But I also want to contribute as well. I mean, how many times have I had to knock your card away just for something as small as coffee? I'm like, please just let me contribute to
this is why it's good to have you here. We get the truth. We don't have the one-sided. You haven't even seen the outtakes of all the stuff that I've had to take out where he just completely blatantly lies.
You and I have to go get a coffee.
Yeah, I'll show you the outtakes. But yeah, I think a lot of times when expectations are dangerous, right? When dating, relationships, like communication is super important. And if you have expectations when you go into something, and if people don't meet those expectations, you're going to be like disappointed. So it's better to go in, I think, kind of fresh and feel it out. Like I've done the same thing where I've been, talking to somebody for a week or a couple of days, and then I'll offer, if we have like a good connection, we're going to go out for the first time, be like, hey, do you want me to pick you up? Because I think that's cool. Like I'm just not going to be like, hey, I'll pay for your Uber on the way there, but maybe I'll pay for it on the way home if we have a really good time. So I got to see how it goes.
But as you said, that expectation, you know what I mean? Of like, okay, well, I'm dating to meet you. Like, you should be paying for not only my Uber down there, but the meal itself, make sure that, the Uber back, like all of these expectations that, I mean, you look at the expectations in any realm of life, it's never really a good thing. You can have personal boundaries and personal goals and hopes, but to expect another person to take care of you in a way.
It's a fake sip, by the way.
I was so glad you said that.
Yeah.
It's not open.
It's
I don't drink on
a real
Wednesdays.
sip yesterday or a fake sip?
I took a real sip
Isn't
yesterday.
today Thursday?
Wednesday, I think.
Wednesday.
Anyway, you were making a great point. Sorry. I'm just gonna...
Yeah, expectations in any way, shape, or form is never a good thing. Oh my God, that was a big sip. Are you okay?
It's a wide mouth. Yeah. It's a wide mouth can.
Yes, it is. It's a two-hander, really, if you think about it.
Just if you want it, it's
It's got my lips all over it now. But
secure.
But yeah, and I think we could repeat a lot of the stuff we said yesterday because I think it was really interesting, but it was on her podcast. Because along with that, what else do we touch on with that? Because I think there were a lot of interesting points about like the expectations and I think a lot of problems with dating today is that I think the internet has like fucked up a lot of shit where there's a very combative environment when it comes to men and women and dating. And I think like you always hear like, oh, men are trash or this person's toxic or a narcissist or gaslighting. These terms just get thrown around. And I feel like it's become like a super competitive environment as opposed to like collaborative where, you know, men and women should kind of work together or men and men or women and women or whoever and whoever and they and they and them. I don't even know. But everyone's got to work together instead of just being like generalizing populations based off a bad experience. Because, you know, you can hear about stuff like, I know people from New York, people from LA, women will go out specifically to get a free meal, right? And when I hear something about like someone expecting for an Uber to be paid beforehand, that in my mind, I try not to have expectations or like jump to conclusions, but that sets leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And it's like, if they're expecting me to pay for the Uber there before we even met, you know, what else is going to happen?
Well, I think you said it perfectly. Is that it feels transactional, correct?
Yeah.
And like love, relationships, dating is not meant to be transactional. It is a constant flow of energy at the very base level. And I think that when you go into it with expectations, when you go into it with a transactional mindset, when you go into it with a toxic mindset of men are trash or women are hoes or this or that, all of these, like you said, these keywords that are thrown around, you allow yourself to be jaded very quickly and you don't allow yourself to be open. Like I think that a lot of people, especially as these younger generations kind of coming into the dating world, are very jaded because of the amount of information that they're ingesting and because of the rare few dates that they've been on that have been horrible. Like people are shit sometimes. That's just the reality of life. Some people are going to have these bizarre expectations that don't flow or fit well with who you are. I think it's about searching out the people who don't feed into that so much, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's why Joe and I kind of connected so quickly because even though, of course, we're influenced by social media and all these things, everybody is. It's about how much you allow yourself to be. And I mean, I could have been like, oh, Joe's a fucking CEO of a stupid dating app, and oh my God, I don't want to get into that. Or he could be douchey, or he's got to rent a Porsche, and you know what I mean? Like those things where you have this preconceived notion, and you allow that to infiltrate you, or you go, hey, let me see who this person is and what they're about, what their morals and values are. Like it's just but that expectation or that transactional value to dating, I think really needs to be exit the fucking chat.
Yeah.
We don't need that anymore.
Certainly. And I think it works the opposite way too, where like Hollywood movies and TV shows have conditioned us to like have like, because Dr. Ali said it really well, where he's like, movies will end and they lived happily ever after, but they only show like once they get together. They don't show all the shit you go through in a relationship and the work it takes to like have a happy and successful one and all the day-to-day stuff. Yeah. So we get like kind of brainwashed by all this stuff, and
both sides too.
Yeah.
Because like you either have like reality TV, which it's like the people hate each other and you're like, why are they together? And they're just hitting each other. Or like a movie and it's like, oh, it's all perfect. And then there's nothing in the middle of the reality of sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good. Do you want to progress through all of it with somebody or you don't?
Right.
You know, and I think that's the whole world, right? Like it's extreme one way, extreme the other way.
And I get it. It's entertaining, and that's
selling.
No one's gonna watch the boring shit of like the everyday life, of
no
course.
one's gonna
like,
watch the middle ground things,
right? But that's what life
reality.
actually is. So you have to realize that and realize like the work it takes on yourself and with your partner or significant other and all the stuff. And that's why I think like relationships are so much work and like a job in itself if you want to make it work really well.
I think just being alive is a lot of work and a job in itself.
Yeah,
so true.
Certainly.
I was listening to Jay Shetty. Jay Shetty better like at me one of these times because every podcast I'm talking about him. But he had Mel Robbins on, and they were talking about this fascinating stuff about how you're subconsciously have all these insecurities from before the age of 4, based off of something your parents did to you. And it doesn't matter what it was, and obviously you're too young to even know what's going on, but something that your parents did to you before the age of 4 kind of sets you off on the traumas of your life. And then you don't realize until you're like in your 30s and just every year you get older, you're like, okay, how do I unravel all this stuff from when I was 4 years old? So I think just being alive is really interesting, and you know,
yeah, I mean, you spoke on something kind of I feel like is quite poignant to this though. It's like, you know, you talk about just life in general, coming from an age of 4. Like, think about dating. It's probably your first few experiences of dating, of sex, of all these things that mold your viewpoint when you go through the dating process until hopefully you find your forever person. You know what I mean? It is these preconceived notions of, like, a chick who asked to order an Uber, may the first time she ever went out and dated somebody, they were like, oh, I'm going to pay for this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And she's like, all right, this is where I'm at. You know what I mean? And yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think a lot of things are formed very early on in the process, whether it be life itself or the dating process. And then it's about unwiring those unhealthy ones and wiring back in healthy ones and figuring out what works for you best.
Yeah. I think we had something happen the other night and we had like a deep conversation. I was like, you know what? I think when I was like 11 or 12, this happened to me, and this is why it's sticking with me. And I'm now 32. And it's just, every day something new could pop up, and you have to rewind it all the way back into the early days of your life and be like, holy shit, for the last 20 years, I had no idea why, this was bothering me. But now that we're talking about it, I think about it, this happened when I was 12, and we're like, oh shit, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And you can all put it back. Isn't it a beautiful thing to be able to have someone to be able to talk to those things about as well, to explore those things, to like have a safe space, basically.
Yeah, and I think even before I moved here, we always like, back home, people talk about therapy, right? And it was like a big stigma, like, oh, you're in therapy, like, what's wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
But I think therapy has nothing's wrong with you. It's just you're talking to somebody and they're giving you a different spin on anything. You're like, you could be the happiest guy in the world, and it's like, hey, have you ever thought about this? Like, no. And it's like, oh, why don't you think about that? And you could evolve, still being happy, still being more happy, just understanding yourself more.
Anybody that says that therapy is for, I mean, I don't know, I feel like there's this like weakness or this vulnerability that equals weakness when it comes to therapy. You're a fucking strong, smart human being to go to therapy. You're trying to figure yourself out, trying to figure out why you do what you do, why you are the way you are. That is self-exploration is probably one of the main purposes why we're here. See what we contribute to the rest of the world.
For sure. Yeah, I want to talk about something else that we kind of touched on, the difference between putting your best foot forward on a date and not being true to who you are, right? Where eventually the person's going to see the real you. Because last night we talked about, like, I said I'm like a dive bar guy.
Hell yeah.
On a first date, and then because that's who I really am more so. Like I enjoy a nice little restaurant from time to time, but that's not who I am. So I would never take a first date to a nice restaurant because it's a first date and it's not really who I am. So what do you think is the difference there between like, putting your best foot forward versus, because I think a lot of people try to impress. Like I have a friend who I was saying last night takes every first date to Craig's, which I don't know how much that costs.
Catch.
Probably
That's a lot of money.
Not
That's
Craig's.
a lot of money.
Either way,
because you're not a catch guy.
Not a catch guy. Thank you. So either one, I kind of grouped them together for the.
They're basically the same thing.
Yeah,
it's fine.
like super high end.
Yeah, bougie place.
Yeah, a lot of money.
Is that who he is as a human being, or is that something that he does on a regular basis?
He's got the money to do it, I guess, but it's definitely more to like put up a certain status, though. Yeah, show a certain status.
I think when you're again, it's like transactional kind of element to it, right? So if you're doing something for the status of it, then it's just kind of like, look how fucking amazing I am, and look what I can bring to the table. This should be valued over who I am as a human being. Like when I say put your best foot forward, I think I talk about like a heightened version of yourself, right? It's not lying about anything. It's not embellishing anything too hard, but it's also like, this is the bright, bubbly first date version of me where we're just getting to know each other. Everything is new and exciting, and hopefully on a first date, you're pinging off each other. And I think that if you start to really step out of your own realms of life or like you said, you're a dive bar guy. I love dive bars. And I think my preferred place to go on a first date or any date is there you go. Another fake sip. I just love he keeps going for it.
That was such a genuine laugh.
I love it. I think then you're lying. You're falsifying who you are as a human being. And I think the entire purpose of dating is to be able to find someone that loves you for
But what if this guy is being genuine and nice at catch?
Oh,
and
certainly. Then
because I think maybe we see catch every night as outlandish because I can't afford to go to catch every night,
right?
And it's like, oh, he's putting on something. But say I was a billionaire, right? and going to catch was.
No, but that's what I'm saying is like, is this person, is that his normal day-to-day life? Because if he does that all throughout the week and that's his normal process, then going to catch is no problem. But if you're shifting who you are, if you're like normally a dive bar guy and then you're like, oh, my first date, I'm going to take every first date to catch just purely because I want that stature symbol, which I think happens quite a lot here in Los Angeles.
But I think you set yourself up for failure.
Yeah,
on the third date.
And that's kind of what I probably didn't explain it well, but for him, that's his normal, right?
Okay.
For me, if I was to do that, that would be out of my normal.
And I know, not personally, but I know of a lot of experiences where that has happened, where someone is kind of fronted, oh, this is my lifestyle, this is what I live, and it feeds into the women who are like, pay for my Uber on the first date, you know what I mean? And they get used to that, and then all of a sudden that's not happening again when they go further into the dating process, and it's like a lie on both parts, and starting anything with dishonesty is basically a recipe for mistrust and not a good relationship in general.
Yeah,
I think it'd be super interesting. Like, say catch guy, he's like us, genuine guy, and he takes one of these women to catch, and he doesn't pay for it, right? And he's like, let's split the bill. I'm so curious to see, being at such a nice place when it's probably pretty expensive to split, how a woman would take that.
Truth be told, I mean, can I be honest about this? If someone was like, I want to take you on a first date, I'm like, all right, sweet, let's go. And they're like, I want to take you to catch. And I was like, okay, that's not my type of place. I would much prefer like a dive bar, a place like Frankie's, like sweet, romantic, cheap, easy. And they were like, let's split the bill. I'd be like, fuck no.
Yeah.
I didn't want to come here in the first place. You have asked me to come to
But why is that different? Like, so Gracias Madre is...
Because
it's in the middle of catch in a dive bar.
Either I'm spending $70 or $250 on a first date that.
But where's the barrier? Like, okay, so take Gracias Madre, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a dive bar, but it was definitely a decent.
Yeah, it's a nice place,
right? And you still offered to pay.
I would have paid for the entire thing because it was like, if you had been like, let's go to catch, I would have been like, oh, really? And then B, I would have been like, this is an exorbitant amount of money to spend on a first date.
You would have told me. So say we went to catch, right? Mm-hmm. And it was the same. Everything played out the same exact way. We had a great time. Mm-hmm. We really connected. And the bill came, and you what? You'd say, oh, no, I'm not going to reach?
If everything played out the exact same way, I would reach, I would offer to pay, but then I'd be like, let's never go to a place like this again because it overpriced, doesn't make any sense. I'm not that type of woman, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean? But like, if this is like a random person, they took me to catch on the first date, I'd be like, why the fuck are you spending this much money? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
No,
that's just me.
Fair.
But a place like Gracias Madre, I'm like, oh, $70 is, it's a nice night out. Even if I didn't like that person, I'd be like, all right, sweet.
He was going to ask you to gas up the Porsche too. That's premium.
Premium?
Yeah, at least half the gas. But I think that's part of it too, is like, if you like the person a lot, maybe afterwards you'd be like, why did he make me split or ask me to split that when he asked me? Because that's one of the things we would always ask on the street, who should pay on a first date? And I think the most common response, or maybe not the most common, but a lot of people were into the idea of whoever asks the other person out. Yeah. Right? So I think, like you said, if a guy was to ask you out and pick the restaurant, I do think it's kind of on him. Although, like you said, the offer is appreciated, and it's like, oh, good, she offered.
And I'll always offer, and even if I didn't want to pay half of $500 to go to dinner, I'd still do it. But then afterwards, to be like, why did that happen? Like, why are we paying that amount of money to go on a first date, especially if it was shit? That would be horrible. If you shit date, out $250.
It happens every night. Probably here in LA.
I'm sure, but still.
Yeah.
Still. Oof. Could you imagine spending $500 a night
on a
first date?
No, I can't, because I'm engaged. I can't imagine.
Boom.
Right there. How beautiful Joe's sweater is.
It is nice.
Like
my mom got it for me, and we took the tags off tonight, so it's the first time wearing it, and it's definitely... Fresh. Would you wear this?
Hell yeah.
You would?
It's a nice color, right?
Green, baby.
You wouldn't wear this.
Put a nice chain on, you're ready to go.
Let's go.
All right. If he would wear it, then it's saying something. All right. Thanks, Mom. But yeah, so like maybe with you, right? The whole, how long do you wait to meet somebody? Have you ever been in a situation where you got to know somebody through the phone a little bit before meeting them and set an expectation so high, and then when you met them, you're kind of like, oh. And I know we used the example last week, but different to that. Just
what was the example last week?
The girl you went to the concert with.
Oh yeah, and I've told that on this podcast before.
But just someone maybe who you got connected with through a friend or something, or because you never really used apps, right?
No.
Yeah.
I will say, yeah, I mean, all I can say to that until I think of an example, if I have one, is definitely the longer you talk to somebody, whether it's going well or not. Like, if it's going really well, I think you're more excited to meet them sooner than later. But eventually it hits a point where it's like, all right, like, shit or get off the pot. Like, this is fizzling out. We need to meet, or I'm tired of, you know, especially like if you're single and you're texting a few people at a time or 20 people, like whatever it is, like, it gets overwhelming, and it's like, all right, I want to actually meet somebody and see if I can, like, you know, start to form a connection with this person, like whoever you are into the most, I guess, because that does get very overwhelming sometimes if you're talking to a lot of people at once. And I think the sooner you meet somebody, the better. Absolutely. Because you do need, we always say it. I mean, you need to actually meet somebody to see how you feel about them and how they feel about you, and if you guys are connecting. Doesn't happen over the phone. Like I said, the person, like I told the story about the date that didn't go so well. Like, we had a nice little connection on the phone, and then when we actually got together, I was like,
So how did you guys get connected originally?
Met in person, talked for 2 minutes. I was very drunk. It went well. Like, the 2 minutes in my mind went well. And we exchanged numbers, and then 2 weeks worth of pretty good texting. And then when we actually met, I was like, this isn't really what I thought it was, or hoped it was going to be.
That's what meeting, people in person is for. It's either a fantastic connection or it's the realization that this person isn't for me. But either way, it helps you progress. And I think that, like, people are so happy to just sit on their phones in this weird, bizarre comfort zone of just being able to, like, kind of know somebody, but kind of not have any commitment, not really delve deep into it. But I also think that people are sorely missing that as well. They're missing that, like, true human connection, whether it be just a shitty first date or somebody that you meet and, decide to marry.
And I think that goes into what we were talking about earlier with expectations, right? Because, like, you build this person up in your mind of how they are through texting, right? And you're like, oh, they seem like this, and then you meet them and it's like, oh, they're not like that. So it lets you down.
Text is so hard. I'm so sorry, but, like, text is so difficult to be able to decipher people's tones, people's humor, people's cadence, like, all of these things that I think we innately are attracted to.
Yeah.
Like, humor is such a big thing, right? I think everybody likes someone who's funny and who's engaging, and someone could be funny over the phone, but that shit could be curated for 2 hours before they send it to you, and they've looked up a whole bunch of 101 best jokes or something like that.
And they've used that same line on everybody else.
Exactly. And so it's like, I think it's really seeing somebody in person, and it also goes back to what we were just talking about then in terms of putting your best foot forward, all these people who kind of heighten their lives or the versions of their lives to an unrealistic degree. You can tell pretty quickly. Like, I've been on some dates with some very wealthy people, or perceived very wealthy people who thought that they were wealthy or wanted to put off the image that they were wealthy, but you could tell through their day-to-day or where they lived or what they were doing, they weren't. And that's what they valued the most, that perception of them being an upper echelon of society.
Yeah.
And I think that if you have the wrong intentions when you're trying to date, that's when you come up against issues. That's when you come up against, like, 20 or 30 people that you're talking to all of the time. Like, it's a bit of a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, certainly.
So we have a question from a fan.
Oh, shit.
Fan of Steve? Steve on
Fan
the
of
street?
you.
Oh, me?
So
Didn't even know I had any fans.
I'm very curious about this too. It's a very interesting question.
Let me hear.
So word around town is that you are bisexual. Could you have seen your life with Joe right now gone the same way with a woman if you had a deep connection with
Did
them?
it literally say word around town?
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, first and foremost, I wouldn't.
Do tell.
I will. I wouldn't really classify myself as a true bisexual. I classify myself as a pansexual. Enjoy people for who they are. Doesn't really matter the gender. I've slept with women. I've had threesomes with women. I've always stayed pretty on the path of penis. Always being a big fan. You know what I
Penis
mean?
path, yeah.
And only ever had, like, real relationships with men. What was the question? Like, what was the latter part of the question?
So, okay, yeah. So maybe it still makes sense anyway. If it was a pansexual, but the person you connected with intellectually was a woman, could you see it going serious in life?
Well, intellectually, yes, but
Does that
physically,
mean,
perhaps not.
But doesn't pansexual mean you're attracted to
Means you're
them
attracted
mentally?
to the person. Yeah, exactly. But the physical side is still a part of a relationship, right?
Okay.
So, like, I can be attracted to a woman for a couple of nights. I can sleep with her. It's a really enjoyable experience, but it's not something that I want all of the time. I am predominantly attracted to men just purely because I like the female masculine, a feminine masculine kind of energy flow. Sorry. And I've never once in my life thought about being in a relationship with a woman. It was more so a beautiful experience intellectually and physically, correct? But yeah, no, I never really envisioned myself with a woman. I enjoy them, but
For a night.
or just
That's exciting.
Yeah, but I've never, ever thought about having a relationship with a woman. No.
Does having children weigh into that at all, or is that just a side piece of it?
I think it does. Not that you can't have children, as two females, but I think that
How does that work physically?
IVF.
Oh,
It's actually crazy that they get an egg from one woman and they implant it to the other one, so
Yeah.
it's like both of the genetics are kind of mushing together.
that's
Man,
wild.
between
Fascinating.
that and the fusion energy,
Oh well,
my night's blown.
Yeah.
making
Pun
leaps and bounds.
intended.
Children definitely are a part of it, you know what I mean? And I think in a way, even though I am incredibly progressive in a lot of different areas of my life, there is a part of me that's incredibly traditional in terms of the way that I view my future family. I've always viewed it as a male and a female. And I suppose if there were experiences in my life that had pushed me in a different direction, then I could have a better answer or a more in-depth answer, but I've never really pursued a woman for a relationship. I've loved women before. I've loved my best friends, and I've had incredible sexual encounters with women, but it's never been like a soul connection or a spirit connection. It's just been physical and mental, and I think you need all three to actually have a partner in life.
Okay. And we touched on something else you said last night as well, how when we first met you, and you still are very forward thinking, modern woman. But in our relationship, you kind of organically not default, but naturally fall into and gravitate and love playing that old-fashioned partner role as a woman. How do you feel about that? And do you actually feel comfortable doing it, or is it just trying to make me happy?
Well, of course I always want
Anything makes me happy. You
always
can do
want to
whatever
make
you
you
want.
happy. But I think that I'm a natural born carer, right? And I think that even when I was living with roommates, I was always making sure that they were taken care of and fed. And I mean, I'll ask you whenever we're at a bar when you're not drinking, I'm like, do you need water? Do you need anything? It's my natural personality to be a carer. But I also always relished in the idea of being able to take care of the person that I was with. And I think that especially as the app grows and the amount of time and energy that needs to be put into it, I think to myself, okay, so how can I contribute? Not only can I contribute by writing the blogs and being on the podcast and helping you with invoices and random shit like that, but I can also make sure that you have 3 healthy square meals a day. I make sure that your laundry's...
2.
Well, you only eat 2 meals a day, it's so true. Sometimes you eat 3. On Saturdays and Sundays you eat 3. Make sure your laundry's done. And there's probably a lot of women in this very woke world that we live in that go, you shouldn't be adhering to such traditional things. But it makes me happy because I know that in the times that I don't want to be traditional, then all of the hard work we're putting in now will kind of allow that to happen. You know what I mean? But it's also a good, I suppose, practice run for when we have children. Imagine how many fucking meals I'm going to have making then.
Yeah.
How much laundry I'm going to have to do. Oh, God. So, no, I enjoy it. I really, truly do. I enjoy taking care of you. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, it allows you to focus on what you need to focus on. It gives you a couple of extra hours per day to grow this out.
Maybe not a couple extra hours, but it takes a lot of stress away.
Yeah.
Like coming home and you're cooking and everything's clean and my clothes are ready. It's like, oh, something I would have had to think about and stress about is now done.
But then
So it takes
in the
stress
same
away.
vein, it's not like, you don't do dishes. It's not like you don't do laundry. It's not like you don't clean. I think it's just predominantly I'm taking on a lion's share of that responsibility at the moment. It might be a couple of weeks. I'm like, fuck it. I don't want to clean. I don't want to do the dishes. Can you do it? And for the most part, you're very willing. I think we divvy up what we do and how we do it very well.
Yeah.
But yes, leaning towards the more traditional.
And you guys have been living together now for what, a couple weeks?
Week and a half.
Week and a half. Okay.
So let's talk about this in 6 months.
It'll be
you know what I
interesting
mean?
to revisit at some point.
But it feels like kind of in a way that we've been living with each other forever, or for a prolonged period of time. It's just
Yeah. I mean, little things. That one that frustrates the shit out of me is that I don't have socks. So like,
Oh,
You don't have socks?
Mike,
no.
he has
So like
socks.
I when
he just
when
looks with his mouth rather than with his eyes.
No. When we lived separately, I always knew where my socks were, right? There was a pair of socks all the time. 10 pairs of socks. And then I'd go to her apartment and I'd wake up in the morning and my socks are gone, right? And then I'd find one and then I'd have to take one of hers because the other one's lost. Now that we live together, I still have the same amount of socks.
I saw that. I
frustration?
felt it. Yeah.
But in the drawer, none of the socks are there. So I don't know what she eats the socks or something.
He thinks I'm making some like sock shrine of him.
yeah, what's happening here?
I don't know.
She
Delilah,
does
maybe?
something. No.
Perhaps, but
Hannah
hopefully-
does something with the
hopefully
socks.
she's not eating them. Did you not go into your drawer this morning and there was a plethora of socks waiting?
4 pairs.
Better than nothing.
Yeah, so
said
you know
there
what she
were no
probably did?
socks.
She probably took the
Thank
other
you.
singles and threw out the other singles. So I went from 10 pairs to 6 singles, 4
If the
doubles
most
to now
you have
4
to complain
doubles.
about is socks, then we're on
Yeah,
a
we're
good
doing
track.
okay.
We're on a good
Yeah.
track.
But I mean, that's only after a week and a half. So
True. Very true.
who knows what's going to happen down
Very,
the road?
very true.
Yeah, you can be barefoot.
Yeah.
Good. Connect you to the earth a little bit more.
I guess before we wrap up, we always let's bring it back to the app a little bit. As you know the app, you live the app. So does Steve. Probably you two are 2 and 3 that know the app.
With the
Like
life,
me now?
yeah, the lifeblood of it.
I think when you first knew about the app, you were kind of like, oh, this is cool, but I don't think this is going to be your grand idea. And now you're kind of like, this is pretty cool. And you even say that if we open the app in Australia, it would blow everyone's minds out because that's the culture in Australia. So what do you think about that, and how do you feel the Australian people would gravitate towards?
Well, I just spent 3 months concentrated. Another fake sip. Let's go. Big one. Makes me laugh. I love how he continues to do it even though everybody knows it.
I don't know what you guys
God
mean
damn
by
it.
fake sip, but
You're such a good actor.
thank you.
Welcome. I spent 3 months concentrated down there. And not only do I hopefully understand the Australian people on a bit of a deeper level than anybody else can, we are no bullshit type of human beings. We like to get straight to the point, and especially when it comes to dating. In fact, I think Hinge did a survey saying that Australians, out of all of their users, were the most likely to turn a match into a date. And I think that feeling of just
Let's
like,
clip that.
yeah, feeling of like, is it good or is it not? I just want to know. I don't want to waste my time. I want to get it over with, and I also value, meeting people in real life and true connection. So, I think that the next stop on the First Rounds on Me World Tour should be Australia. Very much an advocate.
You
of
just
that.
want to move to Australia.
I
That's
just
why.
want to spend a little more time there. But I also think that we could really, hit a census of people that would appreciate the app. Not only use it, but like truly appreciate it. And yeah, when we first met, like, I suppose because there was nothing tangible of the app when we first met, it was just this idea. It was a very bare bones, when it was still black and white, and the bare bones version of it. And I loved the concept, but I also know how diluted the market was. I also know how difficult it was to be able to kind of get people to attach to an idea of them being more spontaneous, especially coming out of COVID. Just the way that people are nowadays, like they're scared. They're a little bit like backed into their own corners. But I believe in you, right? First and foremost. And any idea that you come up with and that you pour all of your energy into, the amount that you're doing now, I know it's going to be a fucking phenomenal idea. And the way it's grown, the people that you have involved in it, like Steve, like it's becoming so tangible. And I've seen the results from different people. I've seen how they value it, how it's being put into action. People are actually finding connections. And the more it grows, the more I believe in it, because I think that bar the personal connection between you or you, I think it's a really good fucking idea. And I think it's needed in this time, right here and right now. I think you've hit it at the right time. So hopefully we just keep growing. But yes, Australia. It needs to be in
Love
Australia.
Yeah.
You've never been to Australia, have you?
No.
See? Perfect.
You know what I'm going to do? Once we're generating millions and millions of dollars, I'm going to be like, Steve, you're going to be the CEO of First Rounds on Me Australia.
Oh, and then you're going to find an Australian wife and we'll just all be friends. It'll be amazing.
All right. We'll see.
I love it.
Yeah.
We grow up tall out there, so
I don't have a preference. I don't discriminate.
that's why we love you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your plan for America now? Besides the app, besides like taking care of me and helping with the app,
We're going to marry you
what's
first.
your
At some point.
I mean, you had such a illustrious, amazing modeling career, right? You're transitioning out of that. Where do you see Hannah Glasby in 5 years, or Hannah Feminella by then?
Ooh, sounds nice, doesn't it?
You know,
Or-
bar me and the kids, and you know, where do you see your career going?
I will always be an innately creative person, right? Whether that be writing, which I thoroughly enjoy.
You're good at it.
Thank you, darling.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Storytelling in any way, shape, or form, or I'm a born saleswoman, so something in that realm. I'm not really sure yet, but I think that I was so sure of what I was doing for 14, 15 years and was working 14-hour days when most people were at house parties, some bullshit like that, that I'm taking the time to really think about it, really think about what I want to do. Obviously, like, marriage and children is this next personal step for me. But professionally, I don't know. And I'm kind of enjoying the fact that I don't know. I'm enjoying the discovery of what will be next. But I can bet that it will be something creative.
That's great. All right. Well, Hannah, thank you so much. I'm sure you'll be back many
I
times.
hope so.
But it was great to actually have you on the show. And welcome back to America.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you
Cheers.
for all your fake sips. Love you both.
See, I'm empty. You can't. Nothing's coming out. Drank this whole thing.